You've got a great haircut, you think, and then you spend 40 minutes on it every morning, and it still doesn't look quite right by noon. That's not a you problem. That's a cut problem. The right hairstyle for women over 60 should work with your hair, not against it. Less time, less heat, less product, and a result that looks genuinely polished without looking like you tried too hard. There are 7 hairstyles that do exactly that. Effortless isn't a style category. It's an engineering decision your stylist makes when she picks up the scissors. I'm going to show you which cuts are actually built for low maintenance, and which ones only look that way in photos. I researched the best and worst style decisions for women over 60, so you get real, practical results. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. I cover this every week. 1. The soft layered bob that does the work for you. Here's something most women don't know, and most stylists don't bother to explain. A blunt one-length bob is actually harder to style than a layered one. Every single morning, you're fighting gravity on a flat, heavy curtain of hair with no movement built in. The layered bob isn't a style shortcut, it's a structural upgrade. The recognition moment usually comes around week 3 of a new cut. You thought the bob would simplify things. And in the first week it did. But by week 3, it's heavy at the ends, it's going flat at the crown, and you're using a round brush every morning just to get it to move. That's the blunt bob problem. The fix isn't growing it out or going shorter, it's the layers. A soft layered bob is cut from the jawline with the weight removed in sections. Not dramatically, not in a way that reads as layered, in the 1980s shag sense. Think of it as the blunt bob with breathing room. The ends are point cut rather than blunt trimmed, which means they break apart slightly rather than hanging as a solid line. That one change, point cutting instead of straight cutting the ends, is the difference between a bob that needs heat every day and one that air dries into something you'd actually choose. The face framing pieces matter too. When the layers closest to the face are cut slightly shorter, maybe a centimeter or 2 shorter than the rest, they fall forward naturally and frame the cheekbones without needing to be placed or pinned. This is the part stylists often skip on a quick trim appointment, and it's the part that makes the cut read as intentional every single day, without you doing a single thing to put it there. Add root lift spray at the crown before air drying. Just one pass, not a full product routine, and the volume sits where you want it for the whole day. No diffuser, no round brush, no clips while it dries. The layered structure creates the movement. The root lift just lifts the crown so the shape doesn't collapse. That's your entire morning routine for this cut. Towel dry, 1 spritz, let it go. What changes when you make this switch is more than the styling time. The layered bob reads completely differently in person than the blunt version does. Where a blunt bob can look heavy or dated, especially when it's grown out even slightly, a soft layered bob looks like a considered choice. People around you stop seeing a haircut and start seeing the shape of your face, the line of your jaw, the way your cheekbones sit. The cut stops competing with your features and starts working with them. This is the difference between a hairstyle that requires performance every morning and one that simply exists well. You wake up, wash it 2 or 3 times a week, and the rest of the time it just looks like this. That's the engineering decision. That's what you're paying for when you ask for layers rather than accepting the blunt trim. Before you move to your next appointment, there's one specific instruction to give your stylist. Ask for face framing pieces that are point cut, not blunt. And ask that the overall length stays at the jaw, not below it. Below the jaw, the layered bob starts to look like a mid-length cut with layers, which is a different beast entirely. At the jaw, it's a bob with structure. That precision of placement is the whole thing. The next style is for anyone who wants volume without heat, and it's probably not the cut you think it is. 2. The textured pixie with a side taper. Most women who've tried a shortcut and hated it think they've already ruled out the pixie. They haven't. What they've ruled out is an untextured, unstructured shortcut, which isn't a pixie at all. It's just short hair with no plan behind it. The textured pixie is a completely different proposition. And the side taper is the reason it works when everything else at this length doesn't. Here's the thing about a soft taper on the sides. It removes the bulk that makes a shortcut look like a helmet. The weight that sits just above the ear on most women's shortcuts. The spot that looks heavy in photos and requires daily blow drying just to lay flat. A taper takes it down. The sides graduate shorter toward the ear. which means the heaviest point of the cut shifts to the top. That's where you want it. Volume on top, close at the sides, and the whole face reads differently as a result. The textured pixie keeps length through the crown, usually 2 to 3 inches of hair on top, and the stylist cuts into that length with a technique called point cutting or razor slicing to break up any heaviness and create separation between the strands. The result is a top section that looks deliberately piecewise and lived in rather than rigidly combed or slicked. Think of it as the difference between hair that's been cut and hair that's been sculpted. The face framing effect of this cut is something a lot of stylists underexplain. When the sides are tapered and the top has volume and texture, the eye naturally follows the height rather than the width of the silhouette. That's a meaningful perceptual shift. A wider silhouette at the sides draws the eye outward, which can make the jaw look heavier. A taller silhouette with close sides draws the eye upward, toward the cheekbones, toward the temples, and the face reads as more defined and structurally interesting as a result. The styling routine for this cut is genuinely minimal. After washing, which for most women with this cut is every 2 to 3 days, work a small amount of a matte finish paste or light pomade through the top section while the hair is slightly damp. Not a lot. A pea-sized amount, pulled through with the fingertips in a forward and upward motion. Then let it air dry or give it 30 seconds of very low heat from a diffuser. The texture and separation set as the hair dries, and you're done. There's no round brush. There's no clip setting. The cut holds its shape because the taper removes the weight that would otherwise push the whole thing flat. The maintenance schedule on a textured pixie is roughly every 6 to 8 weeks, which sounds frequent, but each appointment is shorter than a full color or long cut service. And because the taper is doing the structural work, a slightly grown-out pixie often looks more relaxed and interesting rather than just unkempt. There's a 2-week window around weeks 5 and 6 where the cut is genuinely at its peak. You'll know it when you see it. The taper has softened just enough to lose any harsh line, and the top has grown into more movement without losing its shape. What most women say after making this switch is some version of, "I wish I'd done this 10 years ago." Not because a pixie is inherently better than any other length, but because the specific combination of texture and taper had never been explained to them as a functional, low-maintenance engineering decision. They thought it was an aesthetic risk. It's not. It's a time-saving strategy with a good face-framing payoff built in. Give your stylist these 2 specific instructions. Textured top, not blunt cut, and a graduated soft taper on the sides, not a clipper close undercut. Those 2 clarifications are the difference between this cut and the one you tried before and didn't like. The next style is for the thinnest hair in the room, and it's going to surprise you. 3. The feathered shag with curtain fringe. Fringe is the one styling tool that costs nothing extra, adds no time to your morning routine once it's cut correctly, and does more visual work per inch than any other cut decision you can make. And yet most women over 60 are still tucking their hair back from their face, pulling it away from the forehead, wearing it completely open, because nobody sat them down and explained what a well-placed curtain fringe actually does to the reading of a face. The reason this matters so much is what happens optically when the forehead is entirely exposed. A bare forehead is a long vertical surface. The eye travels straight up from the brow to the hairline without interruption, which makes the face read longer and more severe than it actually is. A curtain fringe, sweeping softly to either side of a center part, falling to just past the brow, interrupts that vertical line. It breaks the forehead into 2 shorter halves, which makes the whole face read as more balanced, more even, and this is the part nobody tells you younger. Not because fringe is young, because balance reads as youth. The curtain fringe is cut from a center part, with the longest pieces falling past the brow and tapering outward toward the temples. The key word there is tapering. The fringe doesn't have a hard edge. It blends into the rest of the hair, rather than sitting as a separate panel. This is what distinguishes curtain fringe from a blunt fringe, which has a defined lower edge and needs trimming every 3 to 4 weeks to stay at the right length. A curtain fringe grows out gracefully. At 4 weeks, it's the right length. At 8 weeks, it's grown into the longer face framing layers and reads as part of the overall style rather than an overgrown fringe. It essentially maintains itself. Pair the curtain fringe with a feathered shag, layers cut through the mid-length of the hair, with the ends feathered rather than blunt, and what you have is a cut where every section is doing specific visual work. The fringe frames the forehead. The face framing layers frame the cheekbones and jaw. The feathered ends at the mid-length create movement and reduce the visual weight of the hair at its longest point. So the whole style reads as lighter and more dynamic than a standard layered cut would. For thin hair especially, the feathered shag is a particularly effective solution, because the feathering technique removes weight without removing length. A standard layered cut takes length from sections throughout the hair, which can leave thin hair looking sparse. Feathering works differently. The stylist cuts into the ends of each section rather than cutting the section shorter, creating texture and movement without sacrificing any meaningful length. Thin hair often looks its best in a feathered shag because the individual sections are defined rather than clumped, so the hair looks like it has more of it than it does. The styling routine is minimal. For the fringe specifically, apply a small amount of a lightweight mousse to the fringe while damp, sweep each side outward with the fingers and air dry. The curtain shape sets naturally because the center part weight pulls each side outward on its own. You don't need a curling iron, a flat iron, or a round brush to place this fringe. It goes where it's supposed to go, because that's how it was cut. The feathered layers through the mid-length behave the same way. They air dry into separation and movement without any product assistance. One important instruction for your stylist: ask for the curtain fringe to be cut into the existing hair rather than sectioned off as a separate panel. When fringe is cut as a panel, it behaves as a panel. It lifts, it separates from the rest of the hair, and it requires daily placement to look right. When it's cut into the hair, meaning the stylist transitions seamlessly between the fringe and the face framing layers, it moves with the rest of the cut rather than fighting it. The next cut is a masterclass in wash and go, and it's been the most requested style in upscale salons for 3 years running. For the classic cropped French bob, stylists who work with women over 60 know something that their clients often don't. The French bob has been the single most copied cut in high-end salons catering to older women for the better part of 3 years. And yet the conversation about it in online hair content is dominated almost entirely by women in their 20s and 30s. There's a quiet, frustrating gap in who's being shown this cut, because women over 60 are arguably the ones who benefit from it most. The reason is straightforward. Most women in their 60s are carrying some version of a safe mid-length cut, something that falls below the chin, maybe to the collarbone, maybe somewhere in between. The French bob sits at the chin, not below it, at it. The line is relatively blunt, though a good stylist will soften it very slightly with minimal point cutting, so it doesn't look rigid. The nape is the other key detail. A slight undercut at the nape, fading the hair shorter as it climbs toward the ear, removes bulk from the back section that would otherwise make the cut look box-like from behind. This undercut doesn't show from the front. It's a structural choice that changes how the back of the cut falls and how the whole silhouette reads, without altering the clean chin-length line that defines the cut from the front. What this does to the face is significant. The chin-length line of the French bob draws a horizontal across the lower face, a deliberate visual break at the jaw, that makes the jaw look defined and the neck look longer. This is the opposite of what most women expect from a shorter cut. They expect it to make their neck disappear. A correctly cut French bob does the reverse. The clean horizontal at the chin and the undercut at the nape together create a clear line of separation between the head and the neck looks longer as a result. The daily routine with this cut is exactly as minimal as it sounds. Wash it, let it air dry, and you're done. Because the French bob has a defined architectural line, it reads as intentional even at the end of a day, even without product, even without heat. The cut looks styled because it has a shape, and that shape doesn't require you to recreate it every morning. On days when you want a slightly more polished finish, a fine-tooth comb through the ends and a small amount of serum through the mid-lengths is genuinely the full routine. This is a cut where the stylist's precision matters more than the product routine. A French bob cut a centimeter too long loses its chin line impact. A French bob cut too blunt through the ends reads as severe rather than polished. The instructions to give your stylist are specific. Chin length line, a slight undercut or soft graduation at the nape, minimal point cutting at the ends to soften without layering. And ask them to dry the cut after trimming so you can both see exactly where the line sits before you leave the chair. That last request is important. A French bob that looks perfect wet sometimes lands half a centimeter longer than intended once dried. Confirm the line dry, not damp. One of the things women consistently say after their first French bob is that they'd been trying to play it safe with length for years, adding a layer here and a trim there, never feeling like their hair looked the way they wanted it to. The French bob ends that negotiation. It's a cut with a point of view, and it holds that point of view every single morning with no effort from you. That's what safe should actually mean. A cut so structurally confident it doesn't need your help. The next style is a sleeper cut, one most stylists never suggest, and one that might be the most flattering decision you've made in years. 5. The asymmetric bob with a soft nape. Here's a word that stops most women over 60 in their tracks: asymmetric. It sounds like a risk. It sounds like a statement, like something that belongs on a runway rather than on a Tuesday morning at the school pickup or the doctor's waiting room. But the asymmetric bob isn't an art project. It's a structural choice. And the reason it reads as younger, more interesting, and more deliberate than a standard bob has everything to do with how the eye reads symmetry versus movement. Symmetry, in the context of haircuts, is actually the thing that ages a look. A perfectly even, equal-length cut on both sides creates a static silhouette. The eye takes it in quickly and moves on. There's nothing to resolve, nothing to follow. An asymmetric line, one side slightly longer, the other slightly shorter, gives the eye a direction. It creates a visual journey from the longer side to the shorter. And that movement reads as energy, as intention, as contemporary design thinking. None of those things are associated with conventional aging. The asymmetric bob, as it works best for women over 60, is a fairly subtle version of the style. One side falls to the jaw, call that the long side. The other side is cut to just below the ear, call that the short side. The difference between the two sides is maybe 3 to 5 centimeters. This isn't a dramatic side shave situation. It's a quiet, calibrated asymmetry that you notice when you look closely, but that reads, from a distance, simply as an interesting and well-designed shape. The nape is where this cut gets its polish. A soft taper at the nape, similar to the one described in the pixie section, takes the weight down at the back, so the cut doesn't bulk up underneath where the two lengths meet. Without the nape taper, an asymmetric bob can look like two different lengths fighting each other from behind. With it, the whole cut flows as a single shape with a clean, graduated finish at the back. The face framing effect of the asymmetric bob is different from any of the other cuts on this list, and it's worth understanding why. With a standard bob, both sides frame the face equally, which draws the eye directly to the center of the face. With an asymmetric bob, the longer side draws the eye downward and outward toward the cheekbone and jaw on that side, while the shorter side opens the face near the ear and temple. The result is a face that reads as angular, structured, and interesting rather than as a round or square shape contained within equal-length curtains of hair. This is a flattering optical effect for almost every face shape. Styling is minimal. The longer side can be tucked behind the ear or left forward. Both work. The shorter side naturally sits close to the face and needs nothing. There's no daily styling decision to make beyond whether you tuck the long side or not, which takes approximately 2 seconds. A small amount of a lightweight pomade through the ends on the longer side keeps the line clean without any stiffness. That's the whole routine. The one question most women have when they're considering this cut is, what happens when it grows out? The good news is that the asymmetric bob grows out better than an even-length bob does, because the asymmetry gives you a longer grace period before any one section looks noticeably too long. The short side growing out just starts to look like a slightly longer short side, still intentional. The long side growing longer just reads as a longer bob. You get an extra 2 to 3 weeks of a cut that still looks purposeful, compared to an even-length bob where everything goes shapeless at exactly the same point. Give your stylist the following: jaw on the long side, just below the ear on the short side, and a soft nape taper to unify the back. Ask her to dry the cut before you leave and check the silhouette from behind as well as the front. The nape taper is easy to undercommunicate in the chair, and it's the detail that finishes the cut correctly. The sixth style is the one most women over 60 can maintain themselves between salon visits, and that alone makes it worth knowing about. 6. The shaggy lob. The only cut that forgives a missed appointment. There is exactly one cut in this group that grows out well enough to look intentional at week 12. Just one. Everything else on this list, the pixie, the French bob, the asymmetric bob, has a window of a few weeks past its peak before it starts reading as an overgrown version of something rather than a style in its own right. The shaggy lob is different. Because of how the layers are cut, a shaggy lob at 12 weeks looks like a longer, more relaxed version of itself, not like a cut that missed its appointment. This matters more than people acknowledge. Life gets in the way. 6-week appointments become 8, then 10, then 12 because of schedules, travel, health cost. Most cuts punish you for that. The shaggy lob doesn't. That's not an accident. It's a function of how the layers are distributed through the cut. And understanding that distribution is what helps you ask for the right thing in the chair. The shaggy lob sits at the collarbone, a true long bob, not a bob trying to be longer. The defining feature isn't the length. It's what happens within that length. Curtain layers are cut through the midsection of the hair, starting from about the cheekbone level and graduating through to the ends. These aren't dramatic layers that create steps or visible sections. They're soft, blended transitions that remove weight progressively rather than all at once. The ends themselves are cut with a razor or with heavy point cutting, which gives them a slightly feathered, lived-in finish rather than a clean blunt edge. The result is a cut that has movement built into every section. Lift the hair and you can see the layers, but when it falls, it reads as one cohesive shape with texture and lightness rather than a stack of visible tiers. This is the technical goal of a well-executed shaggy lob. Layers that function but don't announce themselves. The wash-and-go case for this cut is genuinely strong. Because the layers remove weight throughout the midsection, the hair doesn't clump as it dries. The individual sections separate slightly, which creates natural texture without product. On a humid morning, this is the cut that benefits from the humidity rather than fighting it. On a dry morning, a small amount of a lightweight texturizing spray worked through the mid-lengths before air drying adds definition to the separation the layers are already creating. Either way, the result looks styled. The cut is doing the work, you're just letting it dry. For women with fine or thinning hair specifically, the shaggy lob offers something the other longer styles on this list don't. The illusion of volume through movement. When thin hair is cut blunt at a single length, it often hangs flat and reveals how fine it is because the ends clump together at a uniform line. The razor cut or point cut ends of a shaggy lob behave differently. They separate rather than clump, so the hair looks like it has more texture, more life, and more of itself than a straight measurement would suggest. The snapback moment with this cut tends to happen around week 2 of wearing it, when you realize you haven't touched a curling iron since the appointment. You thought you'd need it for at least a few days a week. You haven't reached for it once. The layers give you the movement and the lift that you used to create with heat. Not a perfect substitute for a fresh blowout on every occasion, but a genuine, daily, no-effort version of looking like your hair is doing something interesting. The maintenance conversation with your stylist for this cut is worth having before she picks up the scissors. Ask for a collarbone-length lob with curtain layers starting at the cheekbone. And ask for the ends to be either razor cut or heavily point cut rather than blunt trimmed. Those last 4 words, heavily point cut rather than blunt, are the most important thing you can say. A stylist who blunt trims the ends of a lob by default will give you a completely different result than one who texturizes them. The technique at the ends determines whether this cut air dries into a shaggy lob or just a regular lob with a few layers added in. If your stylist suggests a trim at week 8 and you're happy with how the cut looks, it's completely reasonable to ask for a shape-up rather than a full restyle. Just cleaning the ends and refreshing the face framing pieces without changing the overall length. This is the cut where that conversation is easiest to have, because the layers mean there's no single dramatic length line to maintain. It either looks right or it doesn't, and if it does, a light touch is all that's needed. The last style on this list is one most women over 60 assume belongs to someone younger, someone bolder, someone different from them. It doesn't. It belongs to exactly the woman watching this right now. Part 7. The Silver Pixie Crop with Natural Texture. Walk into any upscale salon in a major city right now and ask the stylists which client transformations get the most comments. From friends, from strangers, from people who stopped the client in a shop or a restaurant to ask what she did differently. The answer, consistently, is the silver pixie crop. Not a color treatment. Not a dramatic length change paired with highlights. The natural silver pixie. Tight, textured, completely undyed, and finished with nothing heavier than a flexible hold product through the top. It is, right now, one of the most commented on looks in the over 60 category, and almost nobody in the content space aimed at women over 60 is talking about it directly. The reason it works so well has two parts. First, silver hair, genuinely natural, grown in silver, has a visual quality that no dye can fully replicate. It catches light differently at different angles, shifting between warm platinum and cool pewter depending on the light source. A tight pixie crop maximizes this quality, because the short length means every strand is exposed to the light rather than layered underneath others. The result is a texture and luminosity that reads as intentional and striking rather than as she stopped coloring. Second, the tight pixie silhouette is one of the most structurally revealing cuts there is. It shows the actual shape of the head, the line of the jaw, the architecture of the cheekbones, in a way that longer cuts obscure. On a woman with good bone structure, which most women over 60 have, this is an enormous advantage. The silver pixie crop is cut close at the sides and back, closer than the textured pixie in part 2, which kept more length at the sides. This version uses a clipper graduation at the sides and nape, fading shorter as it reaches the ear, with the top section kept at 1 to 2 inches of length. The top is where the texture lives. A stylist who understands this cut will use a razor or scissors over comb technique through the top section to create soft, natural-looking separation in the silver strands. Not a uniform, combed flat finish, but a slightly piecewise, organic texture that looks like the hair is simply growing beautifully rather than styled. This distinction matters enormously. A silver pixie crop that's been cut and finished with a hard hold product, combed flat and set, looks like an old-fashioned short cut. The kind women have been trying to move away from for years. A silver pixie crop that's been cut with razor texture through the top and finished with a flexible hold cream or light paste, worked through with the fingertips and left to sit naturally, looks like a deliberate, contemporary style decision. The cut is the same. The technique and the finishing product are different. Ask your stylist explicitly for a flexible or soft hold finish, not a firm one. The transition to this cut, if you're currently coloring, is worth planning with your stylist rather than attempting cold. There are two approaches. The first is a gradual grow out, during which a skilled colorist can tone the dyed sections to blend more harmoniously with the incoming silver, reducing the hard demarcation line that makes grow outs look unintentional. The second is a cutoff approach, going short enough in one appointment that the dyed sections are largely removed, and the remaining hair is predominantly natural silver. This second approach is faster and often more satisfying, but it requires a willingness to go very short in that first appointment. Many women who've done it describe the moment the dyed ends came off as unexpectedly freeing, like something they'd been carrying without knowing it was gone. The daily routine with a tight silver pixie is the simplest on this list. Every 2 to 3 days, work a small amount of a flexible hold cream through the top section with the fingertips, nothing through the sides, which are short enough to need no product at all. The silver naturally reflects light and creates its own visual interest, so there's nothing to add. On days between washes, a quick pass of the fingertips through the top section resets the texture in under 30 seconds. That is the full styling routine. There is no blow drying, no round brush, no product layering, no heat. There is only the cut, the silver, in 30 seconds with your hands. What changes most visibly when women make this switch is how people respond to them. The compliments shift. Where a colored cut might receive a polite, "Your hair looks nice," the silver pixie tends to generate something more specific. "You look incredible," or "What did you do differently?" Responses that register the person rather than the haircut. That's the effect of a cut that's aligned with the actual visual material it's working with, rather than fighting it. Silver dyed over looks like a maintenance decision. Silver grown in and cut well looks like a power move. The instruction for your stylist is this. Clipper fade on the sides and nape, 1 to 2 inches of length through the top, razor or scissors over comb texture through the top section, finish with a flexible hold product worked through with the fingertips, not combed flat. Those 5 instructions are everything. The cut will do the rest. 7 cuts, 7 different approaches to the same goal. Hair that works with you instead of against you every single morning. You now know the structural reasons behind every one of them, not just what to ask for, but why it actually makes a difference. That's the kind of information that changes what happens in the salon chair permanently. I want to know which of these 7 you're considering, or if you've already worn one of them, which one it was and how it changed your routine. Drop it in the comments below. Next week I'm covering the 5 color decisions that age women over 60 the most, and one of them is something almost everyone thinks is a safe, conservative choice. Like this video, subscribe to Timeless Wisdom Path, and I'll see you in the next one.